everybody, Josh Sigurdson, World Alternative Media here, and of course we're joined by author and economic analyst here I am, John Sneisen, and forgive me for not putting up videos in a couple of days. I just went through a move and it's been chaos, but now we're in a new place and let's report on this story.
Yeah, and as you can see, Josh has moved to the left side of the spectrum, so...
Oh, yeah, right. Anyway, so as Zero Hedge reports, and this is a big one, they're back. Citi says synthetic CDOs may reach $100 billion in 2017. 5 times increase in 2 years. And as the article goes into, synthetic CDO new issues are expected to exceed $100 billion this year, up to 5 times in just 2 years. The comeback in complex credit derivatives blamed for exacerbating the global financial crisis is picking up pace. That's according to new research this week from Citigroup Inc., one of the biggest arrangers of so-called synthetic collateralized debt obligations. Sales of the products may jump to as much as $100 billion this year from about $20 billion in 2015. Citigroup analysts wrote in an October 31st report. While investors suffered billions of dollars in losses on similar bets a decade ago, the leverage offered by synthetic CDOs is luring back buyers in an era of low yields and dwindling volatility. It would seem as if the low spread, low volume environment, similar to back in 2006 to 2007 when investors couldn't get enough of levered synthetic tranches, has revived some interest in portfolio credit risk. Citigroup analysts led by Aritra Banerjee wrote, investors may not have necessarily wanted to add leverage, but simply put, they have had to given the lack of alternatives. So once again, we're going into the collateralized debt obligations that we've talked about in the past.
Tongue twister at the derivatives market.
I know, it is a tongue twister. Anyway, but I mean, we've gone into how the collateralized debt obligations are basically a packaged together mortgages, bad mortgages, with a few good ones rated by the top 3 or 4 or whatever, and then it's rated AAA, which is insane. And this is a big part of what brought down the housing market in 2007, and it's eerily reminiscent of what we saw right before 2007 when we saw similar stuff from BMO and Wells Fargo and now Citibank. John, can you go into what you think is going on here?
Well, first of all, these synthetic CDOs are completely complex and utterly insane. I'm just looking at the structure of it right now here in front of me. And what I'm seeing here is it's filled up by actually not even mortgages as a regular credit default swap was. It's filled up with credit default swaps that are against betting, of course, against the default on something. So it's a credit protection. So it's a derivative, it's a derivative holding derivative holdings. So I don't want to get too much into it. Josh is gonna, put it on screen here, the whole structure, if you really want to read everything about it. But it's all these derivatives getting created on top of each other, and the structure becomes so fundamentally insane that the size of it all, just one little thing blows up further down in the specter that these credit default swaps was betting on a credit default obligation to fail, for example. This credit default obligation that holds credit default swaps will fail. So you can just see the insanity of all the structure here, and of course it's AAA rated here again. They talk about AA rating and different type of ratings again, but we all know too well how they manipulated those ratings back in the day, the Standards and Poor's and others.
Absolutely. And just going into that, they mentioned in the article that because there isn't as much volatility that people are getting back in. I mean, the whole reason there isn't as much volatility is because everything's so centralized and manipulated, and things seem very sound for a while, and it's a clear, a clear pond ahead, and then suddenly it turns into a hurricane when that bubble pops, and it's going to pop. We've seen the property values and stuff go up in places like Vancouver, Seattle, San Francisco, Toronto.
Vancouver is the worst one by far, and then of course, actually, Oslo right now is
Norway,
slowing down. They had, over the last 3 months, every single month, it's going down by 0.8% every month. And what they've seen is the actual year-over-year return now is about to become negative. So they're seeing, I actually on our last video that we did on the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund, I had a lot of Norwegians commenting about how crazy different real estate markets in Norway were as well.
Absolutely, it's crazy. So where do you think this is going to go? I mean, we've seen this happen so many times before. It's deja vu all over again.
Well, it's pretty obvious where it's going to go. All these derivatives are just not. So just to explain quickly how this structure works, I'm just trying to get a grasp of it myself. But just to give you an example how crazy it is, first of all, let's say they're betting on mortgages, or it could be business debt, for example. Mm-hmm. But that debt is packaged into a special purpose entity, which is another entity to get it off the bank's balance sheet because it might have been bad debt, to hide it off of the sheet, to not expose themselves to risk anymore. So that's a special purpose entity, that vehicle that they put in, let's say 10, 100,000 different mortgages or loans into. Now they put a bunch of those again into this collateralized debt obligation, create these tranches. They call some AAA, they call some B+, like the Bank of Montreal just recently did. So they're all like different tranches within this collateralized debt obligation. Then on top of this, again, that's where the synthetic CDO comes in, where it's credit default swap, another derivative that's supposed to protect against failure of an asset. But they're in this credit default swap that you can buy, that are divided up in several transfers. So it's extremely confusing, all this structure. But I'm almost getting, what they're doing here. It's just all these layers and trying to offset the risk off of them and put it into somebody else's books.
It's very complicated, and it's made complicated on purpose, as it scares people away from actually looking into it, I do believe. But I mean, I know you mentioned earlier a credit default obligation, not collateralized debt obligation, and there's so much of this stuff.
Default swaps, it's just crazy amount of terms.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to get a really good analytical view into that, you should definitely check out our videos with Stephen Kendall. Yeah. And he does incredible work when it comes to this. He breaks it down so well, and I believe the video, you could search it up, Stephen Kendall, Blockchain 2016. We'll put a shot of the video on the screen for you.
Yeah, fantastic underlaying of everything that has to do with derivatives and how they're structured. Like, I kind of went into it, but if you really want to understand it better, Stephen did a fantastic, overview of everything with a nice presentation attached to it.
Absolutely. So it's hard to give a bottom line to this because we've gone over this so many times.
Well, the bottom line is, don't buy these derivatives. If you're a pension fund manager, I don't know how many pension fund managers are looking at us, or other managers that are wealth managers. Don't buy these toxic derivatives. They might look enticing with returns and so on, and the banks say, there's a limited amount of risks here. But the problem is they're layered like cookies, like mass amounts of layer. And if you take out some layers, they collapse in, right? You can think about the crust of the earth. It has so many layers, and if layers start to fall down, if there's a little crack developing below them, they start to to fall down the layers, and suddenly you got one of those big sinkholes, right? Yeah. So it's a credit sinkhole. Just to give you like a visual of what it looks like.
This world is just filled with manipulation of all kinds. When you look at the market, it's completely manipulated. That's why we have the problems we have today. It's not capitalism, it's corporatism, government manipulation, and these crazy banks that have been risen up to the level they have been through government, subsidization or favorhood. It grows and grows, and it's a cancer. And then at the same time, you have the monetary system. So the central banks just printing fiat out of thin air. It just grows and grows the amount of debt and
buying
inflation.
Up these toxic assets that the banks create that fail.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it all comes tumbling down, and then everyone is basically in debt and subservient to the state and banking system because they're helpless, and it's all because of the system that's been built to fail. So we really need to have solutions. So, as we always go into, your house is not an asset. It isn't an asset.
Unless you're getting more income from it than you actually pay for having that house.
Yeah, absolutely. And then on top of that, you need those, food, water, defense. So your shelter, defense, so you're not gathering things for the toughest guy on the block. And then gold, silver, cryptocurrency, that which is decentralized. Bitcoin is a good example, as it has been skyrocketing lately, as many might have noticed. And there's a lot of solutions to this problem, but first you have to understand the problem in order to apply the solutions, take action, and make that change without expecting the government or the banking system to come and make that change for you, because they have their own interests in mind. And trust me, it's not your interests that they have in mind. So thanks for going into this with us, John, and we'll be back with much more. This is Josh Sigurdson and John Sneisen signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth.
Be the change.
Thanks for watching, everyone. Check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so vastly demonetized by the Anti-Defamation League on YouTube as they flag all of our content as hate speech. You can also find our Bitcoin address in the description in the comments as well as on the screen for you to scan if you please. You can also find me at Josh Sigurdson at steemit.com. That's steemit.com, the future of social media, as a dinosaur social media digs its own grave. You get paid in cryptocurrency, Steem that is, on steemit.com via the upvote of your posts, so I hope to see you there. But until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.